I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Justin Kurzel, the director of the new movie The Order. Um, First of all, I just have to say this is an incredible movie, an incredible story. As someone who I've followed extremist movements for a long time, it's something that's weirdly fascinated me for years. Um, how did you first come across Bob Mathews' story?
It was literally a cold read of the script. So I was looking to do an American film, and Zach Balin and Brian Hass had sort of sent me the script, and I had sort of read the first 15 pages, and I was like, oh wow, this reminds me of like these sort of great 70s films that Friedkin and Lumet used to kind of do, and um, and wow, they robbed this bank and these really dynamic kind of moments. And then, like, hang on, they're robbing banks to kind of fund this homegrown terrorist group. And who are they? And suddenly they're reading the Turner Diaries. And like, it sort of just unfolded as I was reading it, where I was kind of quite shocked that it was a true story. It just seemed sort of so unbelievable. And that I hadn't heard it before. I mean, even though sort of living in Australia, but I hadn't heard about Alan Berg's kind of murder, and I wasn't aware of the Turner Diaries. I wasn't aware of this sort of organization such as the Order. So, I was curious. I guess I've been interested in the past with films that I've done here, about how communities can be kind of influenced by, by kind of figures that, can manipulate them to kind of believe in their own kind of ideologies. So I was definitely, intrigued by that. But yeah, it was really the script more than anything else.
You said you were looking to direct an American movie. Was the idea of, extremism or I guess uh, uh, violent prejudice something that you were wanting to focus in on, and that's how or was it just by chance that you came across this story?
No, it's just by chance. It really was. But as I sort of said, it instantly reminded me of some of the things I was interested in Snowtown, of why people sort of drawn to figures like this. And that's always a really interesting question. It sort of starts to get to the heart of things a bit more. So it reminded me of sort of territory that I'd sort of trodden on before, but it did feel quite, yeah, it did feel quite fresh. I mean, and it felt, look, there was a lot in it that I kind of thought, God, you could easily just tell the story now. So it was, there was sort of something in that as well that just kept me reading and kept me intrigued, and then sort of started to imagine it as a film.
As I said, I understand. I know that you're not American, you're Australian. But were you familiar with any extremist groups prior to starting work on this movie, or did it really all just come from when you first started reading the script?
Oh, look, I think, I think I was aware of particular groups in America that were obviously sort of like lately gaining a lot of kind of traction, or sort of publicity, but not like, I didn't really know much about the Aryan Nation. I wasn't sort of aware of sort of when that was formed and the structure of it, and the sort of influence that it had over people like Bob Mathews, and how the order was an offshoot of that. And then on top of that, this book, The Turner Diaries, that it was like this kind of like Famous Five type book. It was this piece of fiction that almost read like a kid's book. That had suddenly become, prominent, within these kind of, within these extremist groups. So that was all very new.
I was curious. I know Bob Mathews was a real person. Were any of the main characters in the movie composite characters, and how were those characters sort of put together?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the main one, Husk was a character that was sort of formed by Zach, that was, I guess, had sort of many influences. There were sort of many detectives that, or sorry, FBI agents that were sort of part of the bringing down of the order. But it was really important to Zach and to me, to an extent, that we had the freedom to be able to kind of create a character that was really the point of view of the film. We were sort of lensing the whole film through that particular character, and there was something about, you know, a guy that had sort of been an urban guy, that he'd sort of worked in the city and in New York, and had had a pretty kind of lively and active life, and there was a weariness to him and a sense of kind of quietening down and coming to a place like this, that where he could sort of find some sort of isolation. And actually, sort of what he finds is, probably one of the most sort of dangerous kind of crews around at the time. And he's sort of brought back into that kind of maelstrom of kind of what he's done, and it's actually kind of this sense of weariness and experience, and a feeling within him of where this is going to go, that became interesting for us. It was kind of like a weird oracle. He could kind of feel and see Bob Mathews' sort of end game in a way, and that was intriguing to us.
Um, the look of this movie is really incredible, and I was curious as to where did you shoot the film, and how did you get uh, that rural Pacific Northwest aesthetic that really comes through in the film.
We shot in Calgary and sort of in Alberta and sort of around the areas of Calgary, the Rockies and the sort of Badlands at the back of Calgary, and then sort of in areas, suburbs and so forth around Calgary. And look, to be honest, a huge part of filming there was when you do 80s, you might as well be doing kind of turn of the century. I mean, it's so hard to kind of do period, especially with the sort of resources that we had. So you need a place and an environment that sort of effortlessly hasn't changed, and that, is going to offer a lot and hasn't been renovated, and sort of feels as though it's still kind of timeless. And that was that place. And there was something about that landscape that really sort of spoke to where the real landscape was, this sort of enormity of it, and this sort of, the way the skies were, and the way in which that place kind of hovered over the characters that, Calgary kind of definitely had. But a huge part of it was there was a sort of a kind of old Americana about it, that I kind of, that I think is sort of lost a lot of in America, because a lot of these places are sort of, have been refurnished and redone, and are kind of not what they were sort of, all those years back. But there is something kind of timeless about Calgary that still offers something that was really important to us.
There are a number of scenes in this movie that are just incredible, and as I was watching it, I just thought to myself, this must have been insane to shoot. Including heist scenes, the climax, the climax at the end of the movie. What for you? What was the most difficult scene to shoot in that movie?
Well, I think the heists were really challenging because we didn't have many days to kind of do them, and we had to be and we wanted to shoot them in a very classic way. So it wasn't like four cameras handheld, kind of just sort of shooting it off. It was very much like cameras here, cameras here, cameras here, and it took a lot of kind of choreography and time to kind of do that without much resource. So that they were challenging. But I'd have to say Nick's speech, in the Bob Mathews speech at the Aryan Nation kind of conference.
It's a great scene. I love that scene.
Yeah, that was really that was. I mean, I think we're always kind of like, oh, here we go, we've got this sort of thing coming up. But we shot it very fast, and we were in the room, and those words, when they're said by an actor that's completely committed to kind of being truthful to that moment and what it is, and you really feel the pull of kind of that individual. That was pretty scary. You really understood very quickly that influence that Bob Mathews had, must have had to get such a large group of people to kind of, buy into this sort of ideology.
So I'm curious as to um, I think there are a lot of lessons to learn from this movie. What lessons do you hope people take away from this movie, other than if you see someone with the Turner Diaries, run?
Look, I don't know. I think to some extent the lessons are kind of obvious in a way. Uh, I, I mean, I don't even know if there are sort of lessons in it. I think that there's definitely a lot that sort of speaks to today. There's an under there's I've always questioned with figures like Bob Mathews, and I had a similar figure in my first film, Snowtown, um, of how is this sort of influence and power, like how does it happen? What are people, what sort of place are people in to kind of suddenly start to kind of turn their ears towards this sort of speech? And that is always something I'm curious about, is sort of, you know, what makes people feel like they are searching for answers in someone like him. Is it that it's just someone who starts listening to them, it's someone who starts sort of empowering, it's someone who starts who's just around? I don't know, but I do think it's a key in sort of understanding in how groups like this sort of grow. um, and that was what we were most intrigued by in the film, is sort of like, well, what is this pull from Bob Mathews? It's of course it's many things, but
So it's I just one last question I had is so you've brought up the Turner Diaries. That's a very central thing. It's considered probably to be one of the most foremost publications for the white power movement. And I'm guessing you didn't actually read it, because it's very hard to get a copy of it for because most places obviously don't want to carry it. But I was curious, what was there any part of the reading about the Turner Diaries that just made you go, "What the hell"?
well, it's very unusual in that it's a fictional book. It's sort of it's written like a kind of like a Famous Five, like an adventure book. So there's this sort of I don't know, childlike kind of quality to it that you kind of don't associate with a book that's suddenly being picked up as a sort of doctrine in a way. That's very unusual about it. I guess what was sort of astonishing was how literal the order were taking each of the chapters, which were kind of play by play of taking down the American government, like how literal they were acting them out, to a T. So, that was kind of shocking to us, this sort of book that reads like a kind of fantasy book. A very clear sort of piece of fiction is sort of being kind of turned into a kind of reality. And that surprised me a lot. I was looking for something that was sort of more, I don't know, sophisticated in a way, and actually kind of what I found was sort of something that felt in the way it was written, like some sort of adventure novel.
Well, Justin, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all the best over the next couple of months. And to all our viewers, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and keep going to Gold Derby to make your predictions in advance of award season.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.